Hello and welcome to Simply Technical. I'm one of your hosts, Evan. I'm joined with Keaton again as a co-host, and we have a returning guest. It's our first guest since taking our little hiatus, our break. David Kurt, who is currently in his fourth year of um, medical med school. But welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So since we have two medical professionals, I guess is the right term. No,
I just know biology.
I pay money, so I don't think I'd consider myself professional quite yet.
So medical experts. I'm not for sure what to categorize you guys as.
Medical trainees, maybe.
Medical trainees,
maybe.
Okay.
For me.
Yeah,
I don't know about Keith.
I'm just a guy who plays with the cells.
But so we're going to stick to medical topics for the most part. I mean, if we venture off into something else, it's perfectly fine. But we wanted to start talking about the Damar Hamlin. That's the big thing here happening in the NFL. As many of you know, he got routine tackle. He was on defense tackling, and he just fell down, got back up, and then just fell down again, like collapsed. Doctors are saying cardiac arrest, cardiac event. I don't know if you guys have any more details on that. I guess you guys have obviously seen the play.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. So I didn't watch the game live, which was, I should have watched it because, I mean, it was theoretically going to be important for the Chiefs, which it's my team. But normally I like watching the Bills. I like watching the Bengals. They're both pretty good teams. But so he got hit. I mean, it looked pretty. It didn't look like a terrible hit. He did get. It looked like maybe like a shoulder pad to the chest. And then he stood up, maybe took a step or half step, and then fell down. And it really looked like what's known as syncope, which I can't really diagnose that by watching somebody fall down, but he seemed like he stood up, got woozy, and fell down, which definitely would point to a heart cause, which we pretty much already know that was what happened. He was in an abnormal heart rhythm that wasn't getting oxygen to his brain, so he passed out. Like, they had to do CPR.
Yeah, it wasn't like he fell down and like braced himself. I mean, it was just a complete collapse.
Oh yeah, he was unconscious by the time he hit the ground for sure.
Which, current updates, he just got transferred to a Buffalo facility, so he's out of ICU. So he's in relatively stable condition. So obviously, go ahead.
Yeah, one question I was wondering is, what are the odds of surviving like a cardiac arrest whenever you do have CPR available?
So, I mean, honestly, they're pretty poor.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I thought for sure that he wasn't going to survive because of that.
So outside the hospital, I mean, the 1 year survival time for anybody who has like the best CPR, even, it's like 10%. It's pretty like poor if you have cardiac arrest outside of the hospital. It's pretty bad. 10 or 11% people survive to 1 year. Now, Damar Hamlin is a professional athlete. He's a young guy. He's in really good shape. I mean, they have not released what they found. I mean, I don't think they've really found anything. It's a pretty weird, like, it's a complicated workup when someone his age, without like a known heart condition or structural heart disease they can easily see, has this happened to him. So he's definitely going to probably get some besides the fact that he's a professional athlete, he's going to get intense workup for this. And who knows?
Yeah, I mean, do you know if NFL player? I'm pretty sure NFL players probably go through the whole workup again, EKG and echo, to make sure you don't have like HCM.
Right. Yeah. Surely he's. I mean, he said so many times in his life, he's been an athlete surely his whole life, that hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy would have been picked up on any number of his physical exams, or he would have had something like this happen in the past, or a family member. But I mean, some people defy the odds.
Yeah, and I mean there are like genetic mutations. I think it's in a sodium transporter that can predispose people to sudden cardiac arrest at a young age. Although, I mean, I don't know if that means they should be doing genome sequencing on all the athletes to make sure. And I might be getting that wrong because it's been a long time since I saw the work on that, but I do believe there's some genetic modifications that predispose you. So
I should probably state, even though it should be obvious, but I'm not sure that it is, that I'm definitely not an expert on hearts. I'm a fourth year medical student, so I've had some medical training, but you kind of just realize every year of medical school that there's a lot you don't know.
There's way more you don't know. Mm-hmm. You learn more that you don't know hardly, or you learn that you don't know hardly anything at the end of your schooling.
And I mean, I feel like, no matter how much research I do, there's going to be things I get wrong and don't know. So
I mean, they do call it a medical practice, right? Not a.
That's true, but I'm not even. We're kind of speculating here.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not like we're not giving medical advice to people, as far as like or diagnosing him, because obviously we're not his doctor and we're not other people's doctors, so we can definitely clarify that.
And really, so for anybody who's in the know. The reading that I did about this was, I mean, from the website Up to Date, which it's like a subscription service it's like a kind of a Google type search engine for medical information, and they give their own recommendations. Now, they're not like infallible by any means, but they usually have pretty good research done. But a lot of the times it seems like when I'm on the units, people with experience, they're always going to be more knowledgeable than what Up to Date has. It's not surface level, it's not WebMD, but it's also not like you can't just use Up to Date and be a doctor in anything probably. But that's really what I read most of this. So like for this article is called Approach to Sudden Cardiac Arrest in the Absence of Apparent Structural Heart Disease. So assuming that Damar Hamlin did not have any apparent structural heart disease, which, I mean, that's kind of what we assume, but
we don't know for sure.
Yeah. His doctors can only say what his family wants to be
released.
Mm-hmm. Really, their obligations to the patient. They have no obligation to the public to tell them the truth about a patient's medical history or current treatment or anything. So, it's all kind of a funny exercise, and really, I do not envy people who have to give press releases on a patient's status.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was not an easy task.
Yeah.
I mean, doctors are not very often having to give public briefings like that. I mean, I'm a doctor, I'm going to go ahead and call a press conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably the ones who are working for best example is probably like this professional sports organization.
Yeah.
Or like a government official, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess they don't expect them to be announcing whether they lived or not is kind of crazy. I'm sure those sports medicine people are like, oh yeah, he's torn an ACL, he's out for the season. Not all, he's alive at least.
That's honestly like those things would be the things I would be most scared to release, because that's like the highest potential to affect that player's chances of returning, like
Yeah.
being marketable, you know. And if I was a family member, if I was a player, I probably would say, can you please just not release like things that are going to affect my employability?
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of, I wonder if he'll be able to make a recovery from this and play again or not. I mean, people have come back from like open heart surgery. Jeff Green is probably the most recent professional athlete I can think of. But this is gonna be. I mean, that's gonna be scary too if you actually did want to play again.
And that's what everybody keeps asking, you know, to the doctors, and I totally get it. They don't want to answer that question. And I think the main reason is that like what happened to him is really scary, like terrifying. And honestly, I feel like everybody feels really lucky that he is alive. That he didn't have a stroke when he was in cardiac arrest. I tried to watch the recording, and they went to commercial, so you can't really see on the recording how long it took them to start CPR. But really, the data suggests that you want to have CPR in less than a minute.
Yeah.
Between the time your heart stops and to preserve all your neurological function.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they did say, go ahead.
I'm sure they got on him quick. I mean, I was watching and I thought like my immediate thought was that he had a cardiac arrest. I guess that's as like predisposed to thinking that since I work on hearts. but yeah, I bet they got on it immediately, and I bet they had. I'm sure they had
defibrillators, maybe
defibrillators, yeah, ready to go.
So it looked like when they went to commercial, they hadn't started it yet.
Really?
That's what. But I mean, I didn't start a timer. I mean, I think 30 seconds probably before they went to commercial. So honestly, they could have gotten it. They definitely could have gotten it. But you know, that's what you worry about. But honestly, they've already released that he is like neurologically intact, totally. So the fact that he didn't have a stroke from that is a miracle, or it's not a miracle, but it's it's great. It's good. But it's still like, I mean, he's, you know, people who have CPR, the outlook is usually not good, unless there's something weird, like something reversible they can treat. It's not gonna come back.
Wonder what the outlook is for normal people, or like you know, most people who are gonna have CPR are like on death's door already. So I always wonder what the you know, I mean, sudden cardiac death is something that it's not like an uncommon thing. It is uncommon, but it is not. So the whole world would have you think that it's unheard of in young people, which it is not. And I wonder what the data is on people who get CPR that are young and fairly healthy.
Yeah, so that's the weird thing. It's like they usually have ischemic heart disease, which is like, you know, they've had a heart attack, and they're usually like over 60, and it's a disease process that starts when you're in your teens, of just building plaque in your arteries, and then some of that plaque gets disrupted is usually what happens, and then it blocks off all the oxygen you get. Keaton, you know all about this. That's usually so like the heart attack will lead to an arrhythmia, an abnormal heart rhythm that will lead to death. But in someone who's less than 60, it's less likely that it's that. But I mean, especially in someone who's Damar Hamlin's age,
fit and
that there's like, I would say the chances are astronomically low that he had ischemic heart disease. He's a professional athlete.
Yeah, no, there's no definitely zero.
So usually young people probably have a structural condition. Like that, what we talked about, HOCM, is that hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. That is usually what is the case when a young athlete goes into sudden cardiac arrest or sudden cardiac death.
I had a question. So do you think that, because obviously he's in a high stress situation, it's a football game, you have adrenaline running through you. I'm guessing that would aid you in survivability, maybe? Because, I mean, how often are you that adrenaline driven when somebody has a cardiac event?
If you look at a lot of like young people who have heart attack or sudden cardiac death, so non-ischemic causes, a lot of times you'll hear that it's like, oh, my dad was mowing the lawn. So something that was like is hot and like a little bit of stress. And then there's also the athlete's case. Actually, I talked about this in the last episode. I'll kind of show the last episode a little bit because if you go to listen to the end, we talk a little bit about what could treat sudden cardiac death in young people and the recent biology advances. But like most, I think most are under a stress condition. Like the first symptom onset of like someone who is going to have a cardiac event at a young age is usually death. Like that's the first presentation if you haven't had a workup. So yeah, I think most of the time it's under stressful, high adrenaline. I guess adrenaline could be weighted. I don't know if it's adrenaline itself rather than the getting the heart rate up so high that causes it.
And I don't know if you heard of or talked about. This is something that I had never heard of until I started researching this. It's not being taught in my med school unless it did, and I just totally ignored it. I mean, I've never heard of it. It's called catecholaminergic polymorphic ventricular tachycardia.
I have not heard of that, but I could kind of put that together, and yeah.
Yeah, it's rare. It's a cause of arrhythmia, and it is associated with stress, like physiologic stress. Which honestly, in this situation, it's rare. It's genetic, but it's usually like, oh, someone was in a stressful situation, and then they had syncope, fell down, and then they went into a fatal arrhythmia, or arrhythmia that should have been fatal, but they were resuscitated through CPR and defibrillation.
Yeah, or something like a pacemaker, maybe.
So they'll eventually need
a pacemaker, yeah,
a defibrillator, an implanted defibrillator.
Nice, yeah.
That's the thing about Damar Hamlin. Depending on what they have not spoken a word on his etiology. I don't know if they know his etiology. Since he's so young, this is such a weird case. He's probably going to need a full genome, or not a full genome, but they could do he might get it because he's a public figure. A focused genetic assay on known heart conditions that could lead to an arrhythmia.
Yeah, known channelopathies. That's what I looked it up. That's like what the general. Yeah,
exactly. I think if he was not a professional athlete, if he was someone like you or me and it happened at 22, it would warrant it. You would be. This is a situation where you are going to do everything you can to diagnose this.
And the truth of this is, I mean, in the future, I know a lot of people will hate the idea of genome sequencing becoming a part of medicine because I feel like it's very personal data, but that personal data could end up saving your life if you choose to do that and your doctor is able to interpret it. Say, oh, you have this channelopathy. Like, maybe you should avoid this. And in the future, the real future, I assume that we'd be able to treat these things with, I don't know, some new gene editing medicine or even just basic antiarrhythmic drugs. I'm sure there's some for some channelopathies. I don't really know because I'm definitely not an arrhythmia guy. I avoid that in the lab mostly, but there's lots of antiarrhythmia medications that I'm sure maybe you'd be like, oh, you probably could use this.
I mean, he's bought himself some anti-arrhythmic medication. So at least where I've been practicing, if you code is what we call it, have a code blue, which is cardiac
Yeah.
arrest usually. You get like some amiodarone is like the go-to, probably for 24 hours a drip, at least 24 hours. But if they think it was cardiac origin, they might be on it for a lot longer than that. So I don't think they've commented on what he's on.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very personal business. But now,
the problem is like there's so few antiarrhythmics that are even used, especially in codes and stuff, that it's probably pretty easy to guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm sure that you got amiodarone during that code.
Yeah.
The only other option is lidocaine, and I don't think that's used very often.
No, yeah. Okay, so then I saw all weekend, or all week, I guess, was the normal Twitter insanity where they're blaming his sudden cardiac death on the vaccine and myocarditis induced vaccine induced myocarditis leading to a myopathy, eventually causing the sudden cardiac death. And so now a lot of people are reposting and posting all these videos of athletes randomly collapsing, which you don't really know if it's actually this year or if it's from 10 years ago. Some of the quality of them looks super old. But yeah, it's been like the nonstop stuff I've seen. And it's kind of driving me a little bit crazy, but figured we could talk a little bit about it.
Well, and we're not. It's not 100% confirmed that he's had the jab, but it's very likely. I mean, most. I think NFL is like 90 to 95% of the league has had the jab. So, and a lot of the 5% that 5 or 10% that doesn't have it, a lot of us already know their names. Like they were
Yeah, they
outed.
made a big deal about all
outed, I guess, as a didn't get the vaccine. So,
yeah,
we don't know 100%, but it's very likely that he has it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's a lot of steps.
Yeah.
And kind of leaps in logic, stuff that we don't really know. I mean, is that theoretically possible? So yes, that's going to be taken way out of context. Can the vaccine cause myocarditis? Yes. Can myocarditis lead to cardiomyopathy? Yes. Can cardiomyopathy lead to an arrhythmia? Yes. But that's a lot of ifs, for one thing, and we have no idea if Damar Hamlin had the vaccine. I mean, I guess we can probably speculate that he did, but we don't know that he's had myocarditis. We don't know that he's had cardiomyopathy. If he did have cardiomyopathy, I'm doubting he would be playing
that is very
football
true.
well.
Yeah.
I think his heart function would have been worsened by that quite a bit, and he would not be able to perform like a professional athlete performs.
Yeah. My main issue with this whole vaccine thing that everyone's pushing is if you took first off, you'd have to take the numbers they point out as true. So if you take these numbers, which are kind of ridiculous, at face value, say, okay, we have a massive increase in sudden cardiac death in young people, young athletes. So we'll take that as true. I haven't actually dug into the sources at all. But how do you separate COVID-induced myocarditis versus the vaccine-induced myocarditis? And people have shown that COVID-induced myocarditis is a more extreme stress myocarditis than the vaccine-induced myocarditis, which both are very rare. Both are extremely rare. But I think the idea that there's no way to separate the two in these cases if you take their numbers at face value. And then you also can't separate the fact that, okay, well, what if about COVID plus vaccine induced myocarditis. No one even knows if that's a thing. Does it make it worse? Does it make it better? Does it make it less likely to have severe myocarditis from COVID? It's just like all these things that they make, like you said, make all these leaps that don't make a lot of sense. And if you actually looked at the CDC data, and I know that every person who thinks vaccine-induced deaths are CDC is like the devil. But if you look at the deaths in the U.S. and sudden cardiac deaths, you do see an increase in the last few years. But when that increase starts. So if you take 18 to 39-year-olds and look at sudden cardiac deaths in that population, you see an increase. And you see an increase starting in March of 2020. And it plateaus around 2021. And I don't know what's a more clear evidence than that it's a COVID and myocarditis rather than vaccine-induced myocarditis. And personally, I don't think you should really be worried about either of them because the rates are still extremely low.
And in those studies, did they rule out? So I mean, I don't know. We'd have to look at the studies, which is really boring. But
yeah,
did they make sure they did not include anyone who possibly tried to self-harm?
No. This is just straight up
maybe induced a substance that could cause all those things.
Yes, that's very true. And there's been more substance abuse, I'm pretty sure, since the lockdown started.
I think
there's so many variables.
I think there's been more intentional self-harm too.
Yeah, there's so many.
It's really sad, but I mean, it's hard to separate these things sometimes.
Yeah, and so I hate these people trying to push a narrative when they don't really understand stats. It really is just like whenever COVID first happened and there were sudden cardiac deaths in athletes, and you have the left wing and you have the right wing, and at that time all the left wing people were like, COVID is causing sudden cardiac death in these athletes, and now we've come full circle. It's like the ultimate horseshoe theory in politics. We've come to all the way to the other side where now instead it's the right wing saying, oh, it's the vaccine are causing all these athlete deaths. I'm like, this is a never ending game where you can play with the data and interpret it in any way you want. And I think actually, now that I think about it, which I didn't before, I think that the substance abuse deaths are probably more likely cause of sudden cardiac death uptick in the last 3-4 years.
It's not always the simplest. That's the truth. But, and I hope those studies, if they were, in good faith, then they probably did account for that, I would say.
Mm-hmm. These weren't even, it wasn't even studies. It was just, you take the CDC website and you take the deaths in the last 3 years and you can just plot a graph. So I don't know what they count as certain deaths versus not. I didn't do it personally. I just saw pictures of it. So yeah.
Well, okay. So these from the vaccine or even from getting COVID, how quickly do those? I'm sorry, I forgot the term that you guys said, that this heart issue that is caused by the vaccine and COVID. What was it called?
Myocarditis.
Myocarditis. So how quickly can that, I guess, be presented in somebody after they get, if it was to be caused by the vaccine or from COVID? Is that like an instantaneous thing? Like, oh, I got COVID, now I have this heart condition. Is there stats on that or data?
I'm sure there's stats and data. I am not well studied, but the concept of time lag between something that happened and then something that followed is like, the closer it happened in time, the more likely they are to be related. Go ahead.
Myocarditis itself is going to be more of an acute reaction to like an infection, or if it's a vaccine-induced myocarditis, it would be to the antigen that whatever you're presenting to make antibodies against. So it's like muscle-itis, so inflammation. So it's like it's immune response that's pretty acute, but it's a matter of the damage. Is it doing damage to the heart long term, or is it not? I don't think all myocarditis does like a permanent damage, but definitely not something you want to have. Definitely not something you want to have.
Yeah. Well, the point I was trying to bring up was like, if you say he got the vaccine in 2021, is that time frame long enough for those steps that we were laying out to actually take place?
I think you would have the highest. I mean, you'd have the highest risk probably pretty early, but realistically, like the reason you don't want to damage your heart is it doesn't divide, so it's not really gonna repair itself very well. I don't know much about myocarditis itself, so I don't really know what the response afterwards is. But yeah, I would assume that it sort of improves with time. A normal myocarditis incidence would probably improve over a decent amount of time.
So say, because he got drafted in 2021. So I was saying, like, if he, got drafted 2021 and they start playing in August or something like that. So like if he got, before training camp, so say he was to get the vaccine in 2021 with these issues, they probably would have, what I'm gathering from what you're saying is it would probably happen a lot sooner than, 2 years down the road.
I think so.
Yeah, most likely. But I don't know. I don't know for a fact.
Yeah,
most likely.
That's just a theory right now. So
yeah.
Okay.
But I also think there's no way he'd be playing professional sports if he had like the result of a heart damage from myocarditis. I mean, I think he would be like functioning pretty poorly at that point.
There would be more telltale signs before.
Yeah, I mean,
a major incident like this.
This dude,
I mean, he would have
cardiomyopathy, probably have trouble exercising in general, or like walking up 2 flights of stairs. If it's like really bad, then even 1 flight of stairs, versus playing his heart out every single game. Like there's
no pun intended.
I really don't. Or maybe I didn't intend it, but there's like, I just feel like it's probably not the cause. I'd say that's hasn't 100% been ruled out, but I mean, just the odds of that happening are so low versus more likely stuff. We probably will never know for certain. But
no. Yeah.
Have you all heard
unless he comes out and says it? I guess obviously he comes out and confirms
I don't think that the doctors will be able to tell, like, because they would have had to have evidence of cardiomyopathy before this. Which, if they did,
why is he playing?
They could have told us that right now. Like they would have seen it. Like that would be structural heart disease, which they've kind of come out and said that he didn't have anything obvious. It sounded like they need to do more testing. They would see that on a sonogram of his heart, an echo just through the chest. Like it'd be really, really easy to see that.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. I was just
fine. I was saying, I was asking you guys if you've heard of commotio cordis.
A little bit.
Which I think by definition, sudden cardiac death. So he couldn't have had this because he's not dead. He did have sudden cardiac arrest, but he's alive still. So he did not have commotio cordis, but the principle of it is that this happens a few times every year, usually in baseball players. They get hit in the chest with a baseball and puts them into a fatal arrhythmia and they die. So I think that was one of the things that was floating around, at least in my circles.
Yeah, I floated that.
yeah, that he got hit. Just it's a weird thing that, like, super weird, super rare, but just at the exact right. It's mostly about timing and the cardiac cycle that threw him into a weird rhythm, and all this happened. And there could be nothing wrong with him other than he got hit at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And then they
got
a
perfectly wrong place.
Yeah, and that's never been recorded to happen in football before.
No, I think it has once. I think it happened in the NFL in the 70s, but I'm not for sure. Maybe it was just a cardiac arrest.
I'd only seen cases in baseball.
Hockey. Baseball. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just sudden cardiac arrest in the 70s, not a not induced from impact. So
You could be right.
no. I remember now. Miko Sinnott.
But I mean, yeah, it would sort of line up. Like he did get hit in the chest ish. It has to be over the cardiac shadow, so like somewhere in the sternum area, which is, I mean, if you watch it like that, sort of where he took a shoulder pad. I mean,
I thought he took a helmet.
Unlikely.
He took a helmet right to the chest to me.
You could be right. But the fact that even this being pretty, I'd say it's somewhat unlikely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably very unlikely. I'd say it's still more likely than this weird like cascade from a COVID vaccine, which I'm not opposed to hearing like criticisms of the vaccine or anything like that.
Yeah, it's
I definitely wouldn't deny that that myocarditis can occur from it, but
I
just think that I don't think that that's. I think we as humans, it's a very normal human thing, and I do it all the time. Like to see patterns and things, and sometimes they don't actually exist.
Yeah, you can see things. The internet like amplifies so much. Makes it feel like things are happening so much more often, especially now everything's on video. So, I mean, it's pretty scary. You see, people are putting compilations of all these athletes collapsing, and it makes you feel like it's like an epidemic. And for one, maybe they all happened in last year. I have no idea, but it looks like a lot. I mean, anyone could put together a compilation from the last 20 years and make you feel like this is something that's happening all over the place. And it's just one of the natural flaws of the internet. And we're like meant to we worry about our locale, like that's how we're kind of evolved but your locale when you're on the internet becomes the whole world. So it feels like everything is going really wrong in your immediate community when you're exposed to all the negative stuff going on.
I would add that there are other causes of collapse.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I saw one
that might not be cardiac. So I don't know.
That reminds me. I saw one this morning. Maybe I've been on this rabbit hole too much recently because it just pissed me off. I was like in these vaccine corners this morning, and it was a video of someone like collapsing during a wedding. And I was like, okay, that happens all the time. People pass out. They tell you like they tell you like all the time. You don't lock your knees during the wedding. We have no idea. Did this person die from? Did they? This person have a cardiac arrest? Or they just pass out? Like,
yeah. So like a vagal, which is like a vasovagal. It's kind of like a reflex where your heart rate just slows down for whatever reason. It can usually like because of stress.
Yeah.
Until you and you fall down and like usually that wakes you back up. It gets your heart rate back up. But this is definitely not what happened to
no. Yeah.
But yeah, usually when people pass out, I mean, it could be a heart related, it could be brain related, they could have a seizure. I mean, there are so many things. It's not a easy problem to solve usually. They could have a stroke.
Could be wearing their girdle too tight, right? Like
you might be on a substance. That's actually very, very common, and not even like a bad substance. Like if you take Benadryl, it can cause you to pass out.
Really?
So it can it can lead to some syncope. I mean, usually it'd be a really old person with other problems, but I don't think it would cause it in Damar Hamlin, but
yeah.
What's the you could fall asleep? What's the narcolepsy? You just have narcolepsy?
Someone has narcolepsy.
I mean,
I think it'd be rare for them to fall asleep standing up too, but it could happen. It could happen for sure.
In fact, everyone thought I had narcolepsy freshman year of college because I never slept and I didn't drink caffeine, and so I would fall asleep in class all the time. I did not have narcolepsy. I was just tired of it. And
This might be a super simple answer, but to go off of what Dave said earlier about it's mainly caused in baseball, this cardiac event. Do we think that's just because like the ball is more focused, or like, I mean, I guess obviously football players are wearing pads, so I don't know if this is like, maybe a rugby, rugby has issues, they don't wear pads. Maybe it happens more common in that. I'm speculating.
So I think part of it is let me look really fast because I was just reading about this. I don't want to get it wrong, but so it's about timing, location, velocity. I think that's the big thing. So 40 miles per hour and a hard object. But then they think there's also some element to the shape. So the most important thing is timing, but like a baseball is just like a specific shape, a specific hardness, and usually is going probably over 40 or maybe around 40 if you're in high school. And probably like a football, an impact that is going to be pretty rare if it's 40 miles per hour if you're kids and playing football,
Yeah.
If you're both running 20 miles per hour, but that'd be a pretty hard hit. That'd be pretty scary.
Yeah, Evan, you're the engineer, isn't it? Like,
I mean, that'd be force, right? I mean,
force is the area.
Mass times velocity squared.
Mass times velocity. Yeah.
But then it's got to hit that specific location at the specific time.
I saw a video of it happening in hockey with a hockey puck.
Man, that really stinks. Yeah, I think I've heard about it in hockey too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, like, why is baseball, to go down that rabbit hole of like why baseball, but
and it's not
if velocity is so important, then
I would say it's not simple. I'd say it is a good question, and it's
I mean, it sounds like it's just the physics of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really weird phenomenon, honestly. Like, definitely not in the public perception.
When you wear pads, so like your pads like come down to like right above your abdomen, and so like if you're getting hit, your pads are gonna disperse that force over your area. So that might not be the ideal shape of getting hit. So I have to watch the video again, but maybe he gets like hit underneath.
I will say it is not like an impossible thing to happen in football, and it's not even theoretically unheard of before, because like me with all my own heart problems, my whole life I was never allowed to play football for fear of commotio cordis.
Oh, really?
And that was always said. They always said you can't get hit in the chest hard. But also I probably much higher risk for being thrown out of rhythm from an impact than the average person.
Did they explain to you why? Yeah.
Not really.
Because I genuinely think they probably have a really good reason for saying that. I think you went to some really good docs.
Yeah. They always said you can play other sports, at least until high school. They didn't want me to play anymore, but like it was always when I was younger. You can't play football. You can't get hit in the chest. You can't get hit in the chest. That was like they always said. But I guess they should have been telling me to not play baseball.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear about that sometime. if you can ask him why you're more prone to that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was also that that secret family. My dad trying to tell the doctor like, hey, we don't want him to play football. It might have been that.
I guess so. I mean, but I feel like that. I mean, I'm not a heart doctor, obviously, but if I was going to come up with something like the whole angle of like maybe they're worried that that you might have like an ischemic problem if you get your cardiac output just too high and you're working it too hard.
Yeah, I think that, except I played basketball and stuff, so
yeah,
that was also pretty high intensity. I don't know which one's more.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're right. Is your dad? Was he worried about the head injuries in a football?
He is now, which definitely now, but back then it was always like, you can't get hit in the chest.
Okay, so I mean, your dad probably, I mean, without a doubt knows more than I do as well.
Well, they don't let, I mean, I don't know what age this was, Keaton, but I know that they don't let certain kids play, like obviously tackle football for, several years now. I don't know if that was a thing when we were kids, but Like I think you have to be like third grade or something like that to start playing like contact football.
Oh, really? Yeah. No, I was older than third grade. But no, it's just a fun fact. It's not. I'm mostly just saying it's not like some made up thing. Like people decided all of a sudden, oh, football can cause this. It's something I grew up hearing in my own life.
Any last thoughts on the Damar Hamlin or the injury?
Hope he does well. I think he's doing. I don't know if I ever finished my thought, but I think it's good that he's come this far. And I think that's what media is like, keeps asking about playing football. But like the fact that he's alive is like, we dodged a bullet. Not we, I wasn't involved, but like it's really good he's alive. I mean, if going back to football is really important to him, then I hope that he can do that, but who knows, man? I really don't know.
Key, did you have anything you wanted to?
Nope, I think
I'll leave with, and we'll move on to the next subject after this. But I'll leave with doctors say some really cringe things.
Oh yeah,
the tweet. I guess he first woke up, and I'm sure in the event, and when he's laid in the hospital bed, they were explaining like, "Hey, this is what happened," because I'm sure he had, had like breathing tubes and stuff. This is what happened to you. And then, they hand him a whiteboard so he can talk or, write things down. And he writes down like, did we win? And the doctor said, yeah, you won the game of life. And that's probably maybe the most cringe thing I've ever heard.
I hear stuff like that every single day.
Just put me out right then.
That's so funny, man. That doesn't surprise me at all that somebody would have said that. Like, but that's, I think, what they were trying to.
You're lucky to be alive. Don't focus so much on football.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like they wanted probably not to dash his hopes or anything, but just convey how serious it was. It's very serious. And I don't know if people asking about sports are trying to downplay. I don't really think they are, but it's scary. It's really scary.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I had something lighthearted.
I dashed it.
And we don't have to talk about this super long. I know we're at like close to 50-minute mark, but on the same topic of kind of the NFL, the NFPL, the National Football League Player Association, is claiming that concussions are up. Obviously, we've seen the Tua incident. He's had, I think, 3 concussions this year, and 2 of which were in the same game.
Yeah.
So that's pretty bad. But they're claiming that it has to do with the fields are artificial turf, which, doing some research, there's about a little less than 50% of the fields are artificial turf. I guess from the engineering standpoint of like, the ground can absorb more of an impact, like, dirt absorbs more of an impact than artificial turf. I guess that kind of makes sense from a like super high level. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Dave, you want to start? It seems like you are trying to form a thought.
I mean, so much of this goes back to stats, man. Maybe you guys should just have a stats episode one day. But I'm not convinced that, this isn't an outlier year. Obviously, I think protecting players is the number one priority. But is it a trend increasing concussions, which you'd have to have, 3 data points, Keith?
I don't know. I think so. I don't. I'm also not that good at stats.
I mean, from engineering, I remember that two data points is not. You can't make a trend with just 2 data points.
Yeah.
You need at least 3 points. Evan, did you do stats like that?
Yes, engineering stats. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, you want your population or sample size to be as large as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most give you the best trend line.
But I mean, I would like to see. I wouldn't like to see it, but if I was to be convinced that there are more concussions happening now, I would first need to see that this is a consistent thing that's happening. And I mean, because like there are statistical outliers all the time. There might have been it might have been a low year last year. It might be a high year this year. I really don't know. Do you have the?
Yeah, so I have some stats up from 2015 to 2021, 2022 still collecting, obviously. And this just includes regular season and preseason. 2015 had 275 concussions. And this last year in 2021 had 187. So obviously the trend is down. That's your 2 points. The high was actually 2017 with 281. And the lowest was 2020 at 172. So
Is there any way you can show that on screen?
Yes. Me share screen. Screen one.
It's probably not graphed out for us, is it?
No.
Nice it was.
So, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a really good trend, except for that the trend is going down. It's, you have data points all over, but maybe I can zoom in here.
Yeah. I mean, looking at that, it does look like it's going down.
Well, I mean, they have implemented so many new rules since in the last few years.
And they released new helmets, I think, in 2019.
Yeah.
Some.
Too bad they confound the new rules by releasing new helmets.
And so these, if you can't read these asterisks down here, 2020 was the COVID year.
Yeah, that's fair.
So no preseason games. So I guess, or less preseason games. And then let's see. Yeah. So they could also have concussions during conditioning, weightlifting, and individual training sessions. So.
Yeah, which is true. I think the Players Association is just trying to protect their players, which is a very good thing. I think, especially after the Tua thing, I heard a lot of talk about they have these concussion spotters in the stands, right? That are supposed to be watching and calling people out if they look like they've had a concussion. That sounds like a lot harder job than they make it sound. Like people like these concussion spotters should have seen that, but it's like, I don't know, man. That's difficult work. It's not like it's not like a concussion looks the exact same every single time.
And more certain players might be more prone. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've heard before that if you've had a concussion, you're more likely to have another concussion. I don't know if that's a thing, but
so I read a little bit about this. It's yes, I think that you are more likely, especially in a certain time frame, and it's actually more dangerous to have a concussion within a certain time before you've recovered from your previous concussion. So that's like, I think what's behind the whole push is like, if they have one concussion, we need to keep them out of play until they've recovered from their first one, and then their likelihood of serious complications, like in the immediate term. So like, what happens is your chances of recovery, like your deficits, are just going to stack on top of each other. They could keep getting worse and worse and worse if you don't stop the traumatic injuries. They studied it some in Afghanistan and in like I think even the Gulf War, Desert Storm and stuff. They've been looking at concussions in soldiers and notice these trends. Now, yeah, it's all very a concussion. What is a concussion, right? Like, you could define it as like a change in baseline neurological function. But if somebody is answering all your questions appropriately, and opening their eyes spontaneously, moving around and doing purposeful movements. That gives them the Glasgow Coma score of 15, which really isn't saying much. You know what I mean?
You're saying it can be faked?
No, I'm just saying on a lot of our scales, the GCS, that Glasgow Coma scale, is a lot of what we use all the time to assess neurological status, but you have to be really, really kind of hurt for that to even change at all. Maybe a 14 is like you're sleepy, like your eyes aren't opening on their own. You have to wake them up by voice. That would give you a 14 out of 15. So usually it's like 13 to 15 is okay. Less than that, I'm probably getting into some boring stuff. But I think my point is spotting from a neurological chance, very subtle. Especially for a concussion, it can be like they're a little bit more tired. They're maybe a little confused, maybe dizzy. Dizziness is a big problem with people who've had concussions. That's really hard to spot from really far away without doing an in-depth medical exam. So I think the Players Association is right to be concerned about their players. I'm not sure that the turf is making much of a difference. It seems like everything's moving in the right direction.
You were reading some stat earlier that the difference in how many concussions there were per game or whatever, per play, was basically the same between a turf and grass field. I think we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I'm gonna find that really fast, but
I wonder.
That was one data point. So
I wonder if even if we just took that at face value, if the concussion severity is different on turf. I was just thinking now, like, is it true that when you fall and hit your head in the back, it can be more severe than a front hit, or am I making that up? Like, I just know in the UFC in the UFC you cannot strike someone on the back of the head. I don't really know why. I think maybe it can affect vision or something. But
definitely that. So the back of the brain is the occipital region where the vision centers are.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's why they're telling them not to do that. If it's because of the structures of the skull. I mean,
yeah.
If you punch someone in the face, they have sinuses before brain and a lot of bone stuff, and just in the back, it's just kind of. I mean, there's just a shorter little path. I don't know if that's the reason.
Yeah. But I was thinking, I've seen several plays this year where the player gets knocked out, not from the hit, but from hitting their head on the ground. And I'm just wondering if maybe that is why everyone's so gung-ho right now about the grass versus turf debate, is the concussions severity maybe being more extreme from being hit like a back of the head landing on the ground than landing on turf versus landing on grass. I don't know.
So, Evan, have you ever heard of a deceleration injury?
No. Thank you for asking.
The reason I ask is it's very physics oriented, and it's a lot of I feel like I learned about it in Physics 1 a lot with the car crashes, because when you're in a car crash, the amount of it's like force over time.
Impulse. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So a deceleration injury is like a very high impulse. So it's a change in force, a huge change in force over a very, very short time. So if you theoretically increase the time of that impact by making the car crumble a little bit, or I think in this instance, if you made I guess maybe the theory is that grass would absorb it over time slower, it could decrease the impulse. because that is definitely something that's been studied and is
Maybe not necessarily
high,
in football, but like
but
you said, in car
any
crash.
any injury, really a lot of like vascular like injuries can be caused by sudden deceleration, like car crashes. You don't have to hit your head on anything, but if you stop really fast, your brain is going to smack into your skull in the front. It's yeah.
So the formula for impulse is change in momentum is equal to force times the change in time.
Mhm. So you force times change in time.
Yeah. So obviously you can't change the force. Like the force is going to be what it is, based on the acceleration of the car or the velocity of the car and the mass of the car. So like you can't, those are kind of given. So you can only change time in that situation.
Right. Yeah, it's a factor that could help. I also think that's kind of the theory behind helmets, although I don't think that there's very good data that they've really found helmets that have helped in football.
They just released one not too long ago, but to Keaton's point, the change was really only on the front of the helmet. You'll see players that have like it looks like a hexagon on their forehead, and it just like helps distribute the force across the entire head than in like a particular spot, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think that if they're still going to be decelerating at the exact same time interval, it might not matter in terms of like the brain smacking into your skull.
Yeah.
I think we should just ban football.
That honestly, like,
that was a joke, by the way. I love football.
That is like what the whole discussion probably would boil down to, right? Is it ethical to subject these guys to potential injuries? And chronic traumatic encephalopathy is a lot of what people are really worried about, which is probably still going to happen, regardless of if you keep these guys from plays for 6 weeks or whatever, which doesn't seem to happen. It seems like it's right when they return to baseline. They take like a cognitive test. And then, they get what they think is a concussion. They take that again. If it's lower, they wait, keep them until all their symptoms are gone, and that test returns to normal. And then the data shows they're probably not going to have that like second concussion problem. But their likelihood of getting chronic traumatic encephalopathy is still going to be there.
It sure sounds like the whole NFL should be funding studies working on finding better objective markers of concussion damage, like cumulative concussion damage.
And do you know what one of those is?
No, what is
actually not a marker, but they found that people with it's ApoE, is that
ApoE4, like which variant?
Let me look really fast.
Probably
I don't
ApoE4.
Exactly, it's
well, go ahead, sorry. I was going to say, while he's explaining, Keaton, could you explain what ApoE is?
I don't really know. So ApoE4 is the ApoE allele that's most frequently associated with Alzheimer's disease. So if you have 2 copies of ApoE4, you have I don't know what the difference in risk is, but it's much higher risk for Alzheimer's. And I'm pretty sure it's ApoE4 off the top of my head. It's one of the
That's a DNA marker, is what you said, right?
Yeah, it's like a genotype of the ApoE gene. You have 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you might have 1 copy of 4. You might have 2 copies of 4. You might have 0 copies of 4. And I think if 4 is the correct one, 4 has a much higher increase or a much higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease.
I think you're right about that. I thought I read somewhere that apolipoprotein E4, epsilon 4, is like they think it might be a risk factor for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which manifests as like early onset dementia, a lot of mood changes, stuff like that. But
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting, but it's all in the realm of theory, I think. I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
hard
theory right
to
now.
it's hard to like 100%. No, I don't even think they know why ApoE4 predisposes to Alzheimer's, and it's like a very like there's so many people trying to solve this problem because whoever figures it out is going to be quite well renowned, at least in the science field. But yeah, it's all just associations at this point. It's not like if you have ApoE4, you're guaranteed to have Alzheimer's or be more likely to have traumatic brain injury, death.
And there's no reason to test it because you
can't really change
honestly,
it, right? So.
The recommendations are going to be the same either way.
Yeah.
You should go to bed early. You should eat right. By early, I mean just sleep as adequately as you can.
Yeah, I think there was a show.
Sleep,
Food
diet.
Yeah. It's like just living a normal, healthy life. There's not really anything you can do about it, but you should probably
there's evidence for sure that those things work. So
yeah, be more motivated to maybe live healthier if you found out.
I don't think you should undervalue those things, but I mean, honestly, yeah. The problem is that it's like, oh, we should all be doing that, but it's like there is good data that those things would significantly reduce your chance of getting Alzheimer's dementia.
Yeah, isn't it? Which one? Sleep is one of the most common, like sleep deprivation
one of the
is
biggest things. Yeah,
one of the biggest things.
Ooh, this has been a long time since I've read about that.
Yeah, it's same here. I've gotten out of the health sphere a little bit, but I did see. I didn't watch this yet. I was going to watch it eventually, but there's like the Disney Plus Limitless show with Chris Hemsworth, and I started watching like the first episode. First episode was kind of cheesy, so I didn't watch much past it. But it did seem like there was some interesting stuff because Peter Attia went on it for a couple, and they had I guess Chris Hemsworth, he's the Thor guy, had the ApoE4 gene when they did or 2 copies of it. So
he got ripped.
Yeah, well, it was no, he just found out he was already ripped, but I guess it was like a big awareness thing. A lot of people found out about that through the show. It's like who knows? No one knows what ApoE4 is. No one even knows there's something that. I mean, very few people are aware that there's genes that predispose to diseases in general.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was cool. I haven't watched it because I didn't like the first episode, but I did hear about that a little bit, and I saw like a clip from it, and it's interesting.
I think it's a really important step towards an eventual gene therapy, which would be great.
Yeah.
I think right now, unfortunately, it's not. It probably won't help you to know. It might cause anxiety, but honestly, I think you can buy this test commercially if you wanted to know.
Oh, really?
I think the 23andMe and stuff.
Yeah, they do
probably.
that.
But I actually think 23andMe removed that because there's 2 camps of doctors, MDs, and there's the camp that says you should not know these things because most people will worry and like stress themselves out so much. Like there's a large amount of people who freak out about health stuff, and so like, well, what is it like? The less I know, the happier I am.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss. That's it. And so there's a whole cohort that is with that, but then there's people like me who I'd be like, man, tell me right now. I want to find out. Like, I think that would help me a ton. Or, I think it just depends on the personality. The unfortunate truth is, I guess doctors don't necessarily know what the patient's going to be before they walk in the room.
Yeah, they should let the patient definitely be involved in that decision for sure.
Red pill versus blue pill, I think, is the real argument.
Which one's the red pill?
Red pill is the truth. Yeah,
the truth.
Blue pill is
It is really hard to find out you have a health condition, and
there's nothing you can do about it, really.
just stresses people out all the time. Like, I mean, there's definitely people that shouldn't be worried about that thing. I mean, that was why people argued against the EKG. The doctors argued against the EKGs on the Apple Watch for so long, because people would freak out about some arrhythmia they had. Arrhythmias are pretty common, like small arrhythmias, and then they go to the doctor and waste time, basically.
Yeah, they worry about it a lot too. In the meantime, but I think the thing I would worry about is like it not like working that well and kind of providing false reassurance.
Yeah. I think
Aaron just got home. Sorry.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think it works as I think it'll predispose to being more of a false positive than a false negative generally. I think that's how the algorithms are set, so they're not really missing, but it's causing more people to freak out than not. I'm all for the data all the time, but I definitely see the side where people are against it.
Yeah, I think the way that is set up, like if that's true, like which I'm not calling into question at all, would cause less harm.
Yeah.
If there's more false positives than false negatives. But yeah, I honestly don't have much of an opinion on it.
Yeah, and I really don't either. But just the general idea of how much data, there's the people that want the car, they want the whole dashboard. They say, oh, we should have the dashboard of our bodies, like everything. We should know what's going on, what genes we have, what predisposes us to this, all the time, 24/7, updated constantly. And then there's the people that ignorance is bliss, and it's definitely a debate between the doctors. I see it all the time on Twitter. The most recent one was with the continuous glucose monitors in pre-diabetics or non-diabetics. So yeah, it's with the genetic test, the APOE4. I don't know if it's going to become commonplace or not to find out what genotype you are.
Man, that blood sugar thing. That's an interesting one, but yeah, I definitely feel like we can do too much a lot of the time, especially it's like if you get your entire body scanned, there are things that you might find that might never contribute to any health problems for you, or technically not normal or whatever. And that could lead to you getting an intervention for it that could cause harm. That's like,
intervention. I mean,
if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Who knows? And then it comes down to, at this point, probably just resources. It's like, we do not have the resources to scan everybody's body head to toe to see if they have a goober, which is what they would call like a goober is, I think, what they call like just something that's abnormal, but like it's just something weird. It's like there's nothing wrong with it usually. It's like it's not why the person came in, but it's like, oh, they also have this kind of goober.
Yeah, it's like everyone's bodies probably has something very wrong going on, but the body's really good at adapting. So
I don't even know if it's very wrong
or not very wrong, but yeah, just abnormal.
What I don't even know what percentage of things that we go after when we find it are actually going to end up causing anyone an issue.
Yeah. And what is it, like iatrogenic harm is or was for a long time. I think it's much less now.
Still
that's the secret they don't want you to know.
It should be public. I mean, people shouldn't be always scared to go to the doctor, but like when they tell you, like doctors, they're obligated to tell you risks and benefits of everything every intervention they do, and you need to listen. Because it can happen to you for sure. You should just know. Sometimes, usually it seems like if you're doing the right thing as a doctor, then the risks of not treating something are worse than the risks of treating it. that's and definitely the benefits hopefully outweigh all those risks.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
it's
definitely
difficult. It's really
It
difficult.
seems like doctors have a hard job to calculate risk versus reward. I don't know. I think I always see it as if it's like if the risk is high, the reward better be survive like life.
Yeah,
This is
I agree.
we were talking about that on the last episode with the new medicine that can or cocktail that can revive dead pigs an hour after death. I was saying, like, what better risk reward benefit could you possibly ask for?
Yeah,
If
yes,
everything
that's true.
assuming everything functioned normal, that's a big
Yeah,
assumption.
that's a big assumption.
That's a big assumption, but like that's the most perfect risk reward benefit.
Yeah,
And so I think you're just trying to find the risk reward ratio, and a lot of things are worth it. Some are not. Probably freaking out over glucose spikes is not worth your time if you're.
I don't know. I haven't thought that one through yet.
Yeah.
I definitely, yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I would say if you're going to give everybody insulin in the world and say if your blood sugar goes above 120, you better treat that. It's like you're going to kill people. Like people are going to go hypoglycemic and die constantly.
Yeah.
And so I mean, just knowing is like it's like the anxiety, I guess, is the harm, but
treatment is also
much better than like I'm more worried personally about giving someone unnecessary treatment that does a lot of harm to them.
But that's the good doctor.
The good wait, not the one on TV.
Not the one on TV.
Gentlemen, any last minute takes or hot takes that you want to leave the podcast with, or any final thoughts?
Yeah. Every single high school should be teaching basic statistics.
I mean, yeah, good thought. I mean, it's difficult math, and I feel really bad for people. Maybe we need to.
Maybe not necessarily the statistics, but maybe to understand data.
Yeah. I don't even think you need to know the math behind stats. It's like, what's a confounding variable? What's a good study? Why is it so hard to deduce causation from just a set of data points, which we really went over pretty well in the middle of the podcast, I think.
It would be it'd be a different world. And I mean, I'm sure that the things that we said are probably over a lot of people's education level. And I don't mean anything negative about the people who it is, because it's not their fault. I mean, it's
above me too.
Seriously hard. It's seriously hard. I mean, I was an engineer, and the math was difficult. But even then, I don't know. It's like even when you're explaining something really well, you're probably saying something that is not clicking. Unfortunately, but it's true. We should teach stats. You're right.
Or understanding stats, yeah. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for taking time out of your busy study life and busy day. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Keaton. Were you going to say something?
No, I was saying.
Oh, okay. Well, this has been Simply Technical. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Tell somebody you watched the whole hour, and we'll see you next time.